Look, you probably don't need me to tell you how much of a powerhouse the Resident Evil franchise is. It basically invented the survival horror genre with its first several games, and then we're also the ones to completely revitalize it a few years later. That revitalization came about on January 11th, 2005, with the release of Resident Evil 4, one of the best survival horror games of all time, and honestly one of the best video games ever graced the market. Just look at the insane amount of commercial and critical success the game has had over the years. It has been ported to just about every console ever, even VR, and has sold over 11 million copies in total. Its legacy is impossible to ignore thanks to it directly influencing all of gaming for years to come. Hell, that influence still shows to this very day. The over-the-shoulder third-person shooter style of this game was an innovation that has become an industry standard, utilizing everything from The Last of Us to Mass Effect. RE's 4 impact on gaming simply cannot be understated. It's a landmark of the survival horror genre and gaming in general. So you might be asking yourself why they would ever try to remake the game. If this game was so groundbreaking and innovative, then why try to recapture that magic at all? Could a remake even live up to the legacy this monster of a game established? Why is Capcom even attempting to remake Resident Evil 4? Well, the real answer is money, but also as good as the game is, it could be debated that it has started to show its age. The game is nearly 20 years old at this point, so that's honestly to be expected, but still. Obviously the graphics show their age. It was a GameCube game originally after all. In my opinion, the graphics are actually pretty forgivable because they absolutely nailed the atmosphere in that original game. Great art direction and a cohesive style can really carry a game well past its expiration date, and personally I think that's the case here. The gameplay is also a weird mix between modern third-person shooter controls and classic tank controls, meaning you can't aim and move at the same time, which is annoying and a bit hard to adjust to at first, but regardless, the game is still fun as f, so again, forgivable. Okay, look, maybe the game has aged badly or maybe it hasn't. It honestly doesn't matter at this point because they remade the game either way. Let me know down in the comments if you think Resident Evil 4 has aged well or not. I think we can at least all agree that the QuickTime events are the worst part of the OG game. God, I hate them so very much. There's literally a QTE to respond to a question. Dumb as hell. Also, this is a bit random, but check out Vengeful Retreat here on YouTube and Twitch. He's a great dude who loves survival horror games and has built a fantastic community around his content. I'm actually going to be joining him and a few other survival horror lovers to discuss and dissect Resident Evil 4 Remake. So if you're interested in that, then check out his stream on Sunday, April 2nd. The time the stream starts is either on the screen now or pinned in the comments below. Depends on if we figured out the time before the video releases. We really want to dive in deep with this game and just talk it to death, so make sure you join us. Anywho, let's actually talk about the remake now. As we just established, RE4 is a really big deal, so naturally this remake is also a really big deal. Capcom has some massive shoes to fill with this remake. I mean, it's their own shoes, but still, the big question I aim to answer with this video is, does the Resident Evil 4 remake live up to its name? The quick answer is sort of. The game is really good. I had so much fun experiencing it. It's just hard to definitively say that it's the better overall game, even with the improvements and upgrades. The legacy of the original RE4 is such a behemoth, and I just don't think the remake can match that no matter how good it is. Hell, I'd even say that the remake surpasses the original in a ton of significant areas that make it a more overall enjoyable experience. Whether you're an RE4 veteran or a completely new player, you'll have a ton of fun with this game. It being a remake aside, it's just a fundamentally great game. A lot of that can be chalked up to the original game being the absolute banger that it is, but Capcom didn't half-ass this remake either. It's not a repeat of Resident Evil 3, trust me. They made sure to innovate and improve a lot of the game with this remake, and I don't just mean graphically. The gameplay and overall tone of the game have been vastly improved upon, and you know what? Let's dig a little deeper into just what is new with this game. The original Resident Evil 4 was definitely more of an action horror game than its predecessors. It feels a lot like you're playing through a cheesy 80s action movie with eye-roll inducing one-liners and over-the-top action.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
Don't get me wrong, I love the original game and I love the cheesiness. It wouldn't be a proper Resident Evil game if it wasn't cheesy as f. All that being said, the team behind the remake made a very conscious and genuine attempt to shift the tone of the remake to be more of an actual horror game. The original RE4 has some scary moments and is definitely intense, mostly thanks to the combat, but I personally wouldn't call it scary. This remake, however, definitely scarier. It's a little hard for me to say just how scary it is. Having played the original game, I knew most of what was going to happen, and that can take away from the fear. Nevertheless, I think it's way scarier than the original despite all that, and I'd be curious as to what the general consensus is. If this remake was your first RE4 experience, then let me know how scary you found it in the comments down below. I'd love to know what people thought. There's one scene in particular that nearly gave me heart palpitations. Easily one of the scariest moments in recent horror game history. They really wanted this to feel like a horror game, and I think Capcom did a fantastic job of balancing the goofiness of the OG game with the new, more serious tone. They definitely changed how some parts of the game play out to better match this new tone, but honestly there's nothing missing from this game that really stuck out to me. Besides one section I hated anyway, and there's a chance a variation of that section appears in future DLC. The corny dialogue can stand out a bit in contrast to the serious vibe of the game, but it never breaks the immersion, or at least it didn't for me. Like I said earlier, it just wouldn't be Resident Evil without some cheesy dialogue. The story in general is better too, but I'll get more into that near the end of the video. Don't worry about spoilers. New player or old fan, I don't plan on spoiling the game for anybody. That being said, let's move on to the new and improved gameplay of this remake. If you've played either the Resident Evil 2 or 3 remakes, then the gameplay will look real familiar to you. Like the OG game, it's an over-the-shoulder third-person action horror game. Unlike the OG game, you can actually move and shoot at the same time, which is already a pretty great upgrade, but Capcom didn't stop there. There are several new gameplay features and updates that make the game a complete joy to control. For example, the knife plays a much bigger role this time around thanks to some added gameplay mechanics. You can now use the knife to parry most enemy attacks. A crazed villager is coming at you with a pitchfork? Parry it. A different crazed villager keeps throwing axes at you? Parry it. A massive monster that looks a bit like the guy from Goonies is shoulder charging you at full speed? Okay, well, you can't parry that last one, but you get the idea. Adding a parry to this game was a stroke of genius and a fantastic expansion on something from the original game. You could use a knife for melee in Resident Evil 4, but nothing really beyond that. Not only can it be used as a parry, but it also has its own skill tree so you can upgrade it to be even better. The parry ability is balanced out by a durability system that breaks the knife after repeated use, meaning you can only use it so much. You can repair it at the merchant, but it's useless until then, so you have to be careful with how much you use it. The combat of OG Resident Evil 4 is one of the biggest highlights of the whole experience, and this remake enhances nearly every aspect of it. Even compared to Resident Evil 2 Remake, the combat is more fleshed out. Leon is much smoother to control, and he moves significantly quicker than he did in that game. This is an important upgrade and a big change from the original game. So many of the combat encounters in Resident Evil 4 Remake throw an insane amount of enemies at you, so mobility is pretty damn important. If you stay in one spot for too long, you're much more likely to be overwhelmed and eventually brutally murdered. The enemy encounters in this game are super intense thanks to a ton of awesome and different enemies to face off with. Nearly every type of bad guy from the original game makes a return, and there are even a couple of new ones to spice things up further. For the most part, the enemies used and their designs were an example of not fixing what wasn't broken. They nailed it the first time around, so only minor changes needed to be made. The Lost Plaga are some of the most unique and diverse enemies in all of Resident Evil, and they carry that over into the remake. Another example of this is the boss fights, which have nearly all been improved from their OG counterparts, while maintaining the aspects that made them special. The lake monster fight essentially functions the same as the old game, but they made one big change that makes the whole fight so much greater. I hated the boss fight in the original game, but the remake adds a life bar to the boat that does away with the getting knocked off the boat and forced to button mash so you don't get eaten thing. It's a somewhat small improvement in the grand scheme of things, but makes the boss fight way more fun to play. Every other boss fight has been improved like this too, some in small ways while others have been completely reworked, but they all have been enhanced in one way or another. Great care was taken in translating all the boss fights to fit in more with modern gaming experiences, while retaining their old school charm. They also did a great job of incorporating new mechanics, like being able to use stealth in the big blind boy boss fight. Oh yeah, the stealth mechanic has also been added to the game thanks to the expanded knife. It's not the most rewarding stealth gameplay I've seen in a game like this. The Last of Us always comes to mind as a game that did it really well, but regardless, it's a nice addition to the game. It creates some pretty noticeable variation between different combat encounters. The stealth mechanic doesn't feel tacked on at all. It was built with care and intention, despite having to fit into a pre-existing gameplay loop. I think it was handled really well overall. Capcom also added a few new weapons, like the bolt thrower, to spice up the gunplay of the remake, which is what most of the combat encounters end up being anyway. All the guns and weapon parts from the original return, and are just as good here, if not better in some cases. Including a few new guns, there are a total of 29 unlockable weapons in the remake. The variety between guns allows you to choose different guns to match your playstyle. For example, the Striker shotgun does less damage to enemies, but each shot has a better spread, making it ideal for crowd control, whereas the Riot gun has less spread but does more damage. Also, thanks to the returning shooting gallery, you can actually try out different weapons without purchasing them. Instead of choosing between sniping or rapid fire weapons like the OG game, the remake has challenges based on individual guns. I think in general, I like this version of the shooting gallery more than the original. I love that it uses different guns and you have to be good at all of them to get the high scores. You really have to be adaptable to the different weapons. I also like the presentation of the shooting gallery more. It's stylized like a shooting gallery you'd see at a carnival or something. It's nice. All that said, there is one big part of this shooting gallery I don't like: the rewards. The original RE4 had you unlock bottle caps by doing well in the shooting gallery. It was basically an old school version of a model viewer. They didn't do anything, but they were fun to collect. The rewards in the remake are called charms, and they actually affect gameplay now. Charms provide different bonuses based on which ones you have, like giving you a discount with the merchant or creating more ammo when crafting. Now, I like the charms as a mechanic and an unlockable. The problem comes with the RNG nature of unlocking them. You get charms by collecting coins by doing well in the gallery. There are silver and gold coins, and the gold coins are rewarded for completing harder challenges. You then put the coins in a little coin machine and get a random charm as a reward. It's kind of a bummer because using 3 gold coins doesn't guarantee you a rarer charm. when it would feel much more rewarding if it did. If I do well in the shooting range, then I want to be rewarded with a good charm, but it seems just as likely that you'll get a basic ass charm no matter what combination of coins you use. You can also get the same charm multiple times, which makes it harder to collect all of them in a single playthrough. It's really disappointing to put 3 gold coins into the machine just to get a mediocre charm you already have. They also aren't worth much, so reselling them is barely worth it. The shooting gallery has the potential to be great. I just wish it felt more rewarding to actually play. I mean, even with all that, I still had a ton of fun with the shooting gallery. It kept distracting me from the main story. Speaking of the main story, let's talk about the story now. Sick segue, right? Now, like I said near the beginning of the video, I'm not going to spoil the story, at least not in any major way. Even if you played the original game, the story is different enough that I still feel like it can be spoiled for you, so I'm just going to kind of talk about it in generalities. In terms of how the story of the remake compares to the OG, I think the remake has a better, more cohesive story. A lot of that can be attributed to hindsight, but still, I think the team did a great job of improving the story in basically every way. The story of the remake feels a bit like a remix of the original one. All the events and important moments are still present, but they have been shuffled a bit to flow better. The pacing of this remake is immaculate, and I think it is a pretty massive improvement over the original. I don't love the story of the OG game, but it always served its purpose as a device to drive you forward. Here though, I absolutely loved it. It has more heart, it has better characters, and the pacing is much better. It does drag a bit by the end, but the overall experience is so good that I really don't mind. Most of the characters have been given more depth and feel much more grounded too, which is important considering the game is going for a more realistic approach. The big bads of the game feel a little less developed in this remake, but I honestly don't mind. To me, Resident Evil doesn't typically have great bad guys anyway. Some characters that didn't really have any kind of character arc in Resident Evil 4 now have an actual arc. They get to grow as a person due to the events of the game. This specific character was really lacking any kind of significance outside of being a plot device, and was just there to be a princess in another castle that the hero had to rescue, with zero depth outside of that. It's Ashley. I'm talking about Ashley. Does that count as a spoiler? I mean, probably, but look, I just want to bring up Ashley because I think her entire character was handled much better this time around. And I don't just mean because she isn't as sexualized in this game. I mean, that's good too, but still. From a gameplay perspective, her partner mechanics have been altered from how she used to control. Instead of telling her to stay in one place or follow Leon, you can switch her between sticking close and keeping her distance. In theory, it seems like this would work better than the old way, but it just feels like her AI isn't very good. For me, it didn't seem to make a difference which mode I had her set to. She was just as likely to be hit or taken. She can still hide at certain parts of the game, but the hiding places are significantly fewer and far between. They also got rid of her health bar and replaced it with her becoming incapacitated if she takes damage. If she takes damage again after being incapacitated, then she dies. I actually like this change better than what the original game had. It accomplishes the same thing while letting me keep all my healing items for myself. Bit selfish, I know, but if Leon dies, then she's screwed anyway. In total, I just kind of feel indifferent to the changes made to Ashley's gameplay. I didn't mind the old way, and I don't mind the new way either, and both have their flaws. I think the new way could work a lot better if they just maybe fix her AI a bit, but hey, it is what it is. She is less annoying now. I mean, I didn't think she was that bad in the first place, but I know a lot of the fan base and people in general found her voice to be really annoying. I get it, she does shout about every 5 seconds, but she's in a very stressful situation, so I don't blame her. In this game though, she feels much more like an actual person and reacts appropriately to the situation she's in. Her relationship with Leon also progresses along with the story and feels more authentic. There are even little moments after combat where Leon and Ashley will ask each other if they are okay. She'll even cheer for Leon when he makes a good shot. It's a smaller detail in the bigger picture, but it makes it feel like they actually made a connection based on neat little shared moments. I already love Leon, even if that's mostly because of first impression bias, but the remake made me love Ashley too. I would love to see her again in a future Resident Evil game. If Sherry can come back, then Ashley can too. In my video on the Dead Space remake, I believe I called it a perfect remake or something along those lines. At the time, I felt like it was a perfect blend of nostalgia and fresh ideas. It felt familiar and brand new all at the same time. I still stand by that somewhat, but I genuinely think the Resident Evil 4 remake does an even better job of doing the same thing. It does everything I described the Dead Space remake doing, but to a higher, more successful degree. This game feels much more like a complete reimagining of the original game than just a remake. The developers did a masterful job of changing and remixing not just the story, but the level design and the world of the game too. Plus, the whole game looks insanely good. The RE engine never disappoints. The areas you explore and fight your way through feel much more like a real place, like it could actually exist somewhere in Europe, and they look better than ever before. They condense most of the areas and set pieces in a way that just makes more sense while retaining what made them special in the first place. They even added a few new areas as well that fit in perfectly with the existing ones. The castle is the best example of this. It's infinitely better now, while still adhering to the original design philosophy. Actually, that sentence pretty much describes exactly what this remake accomplished. The whole game is better now while still adhering to everything that made the source game the masterpiece it is. The gameplay is better, the game is scarier, and the story hits harder. I mean, I honestly can't really think of an area that this game fails in. I mean, the charm slash shooting gallery thing is annoying, but even that is enough to hamper the overall experience. The game also has a ton of built-in replayability with just a massive amount of challenges to complete even after beating the game for the first time. There's way more reason to play this game more than once than Dead Space had. Not that that's necessarily a requirement, but when you're shelling out $60 to $70 for a game, people are looking to get their money's worth. For a single player game, I think they did a great job of giving you reasons to play the game multiple times. And they're going to add more to the game soon too. The Mercenaries game mode is being added April 9th, and that bonus game mode is almost beefy enough to be a game in itself. I'm sure we'll also get separate ways or some variation of it at some point, so that's even more of a reason to pick this game up. The game is only $60, but I think it's well worth it and provides a ton of bang for your buck. I mean, I am a pretty big fan of these games, so maybe I'm a bit biased, but I definitely think this game is worth what I spent on it. The game is really good, you guys. They really did Resident Evil 4 justice with this game. I'd even go as far as to say that they surpassed the original, at least as a standalone game. Like I said earlier, the original Resident Evil 4 is a classic and deserves the amount of success it has enjoyed throughout the years. The legacy of Resident Evil 4 is undeniable, and admittedly the remake just can't and won't have the same massive impact on the industry. It's just impossible to live up to at this point. So I guess I need to clarify my point from earlier and say that I think the remake is the better game from a modern gaming perspective, while the original game was and still is a pillar for all of gaming. It's just impossible for the remake to make the same waves that the original did. Gaming has advanced too much for that, in a big part thanks to Resident Evil 4 and how innovative that game was. Resident Evil 4 Remake just isn't on the same level when it comes to impact and innovation, but that's okay, it doesn't really need to. Like I said with the Dead Space remake, the existence of this game doesn't mean the original gets wiped from history. You can still play OG Resident Evil 4 if that's what you prefer, and that's valid. The game is amazing. If you haven't played it yet, then you still should, even just to understand the impact it's had on gaming. You should also play this game too, because at the end of the day, it's just a really good game, remake or not. This trend of remaking games can feel like the industry is running out of new ideas, and while that's probably true, we are still getting some bangers out of it. What games deserve or need a remake is a topic for its own video, but when they can accomplish what they accomplished here with this game, then it's worth it in the end. At least if you ask me. That's going to be it for this video. I hope you liked it, and if you've played this game, let me know your thoughts down below. I genuinely love to read the comments and see what others enjoyed or didn't enjoy. Also, don't forget to check out the discussion stream this coming Sunday, April 2nd on the Vengeful Retreat Twitch stream. It's going to be a lot of fun. As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you in whatever I do next.